Hello, welcome and/or welcome back. Please have a seat, we're about to begin. Disclaimer: caution. The Ember and Ink Studios is not responsible for ruining your childhood. The stories you are about to hear come from historical folklore and the earliest recorded versions of familiar fairy tales. These are the versions that existed before they were softened for children. Listener discretion is advised. Long before fairy tales were softened for children, they were warnings. Stories whispered beside hearth fires, carried across centuries, and written down by those who feared they might disappear. But the versions we know today are not the originals. Tonight we open another page in The Dark Origins of Fairy Tales. What is a fairy tale? Before we begin tonight's story, a quick word about fairy tales. Fairy tales are some of the oldest stories ever told. Long before they were written in books, they were passed down through generations by word of mouth, told around fires, in homes, and in village squares. With every telling, the stories changed slightly, evolving into the versions we recognize today. Despite the name, fairy tales do not always involve fairies. Instead, they often include magic, curses, strange creatures, enchanted objects, and impossible journeys. Many of the versions we know today were recorded in the 19th century by collectors like the Brothers Grimm, but the stories themselves are often far older. And while modern audiences often think of fairy tales as stories for children, the earliest versions were rarely so gentle. These stories were warnings, moral lessons, and reflections of the dangers and hardships of the world in which they were first told. In this series, we explore those earlier versions, the darker origins behind the stories many of us grew up with. Tonight's story is one of the most famous of them all. Series 1, Episode 5. Hansel and Gretel, a story born from hunger. Most people know the story of Hansel and Gretel. Two children wander deep into a dark forest. Lost and frightened, they discover a strange house made of gingerbread and candy. Inside lives a witch who plans to fatten them up and eat them. But in the end, the children outsmart the witch and escape. It is a strange story, filled with magic and danger. But the darker truth behind Hansel and Gretel may come from something very real. Hunger, a world of famine. In medieval Europe, famine was a constant threat. Harvest failures could destroy entire communities. During the Great Famine of the early 14th century, millions of people across Europe starved. When food disappeared, families sometimes faced impossible choices. There are historical records suggesting that during extreme famine, some parents abandoned their children in forests because they could no longer feed them. Stories like Hansel and Gretel may have grown from these desperate realities. The Grimm version. In the version recorded by the Brothers Grimm, the children's own stepmother convinces their father to leave them in the forest. She fears the family will starve if they remain. Hansel secretly leaves a trail of white stones to guide them home. The plan works the first time. But the second time the children are abandoned, Hansel uses breadcrumbs instead. Birds eat the crumbs, and the path disappears. Now the children are truly lost. The witch. When Hansel and Gretel find the gingerbread house, the old woman who lives there seems kind at first, but she is a cannibalistic witch who lures children into her trap. Hansel is locked in a cage to be fattened up. Gretel is forced to work as a servant. When the witch prepares to cook Hansel, Gretel tricks her into leaning over the oven. Then Gretel pushes the witch inside and slams the door. A brutal world. To modern audiences, Hansel and Gretel can seem like a strange and unsettling story. But in a world where famine and starvation were real threats, the story may have reflected fears that people understood all too well. Hunger could drive people to desperate acts. And the forest was often seen as a place where children might disappear forever. Today, Hansel and Gretel is remembered as a magical story about courage and survival. But behind the candy house and the wicked witch may lie echoes of something far darker. A time when hunger shaped the stories people told their children. Because the story may be familiar, but the truth behind it rarely is. Until next time, another page waits in the dark origins of fairy tales. Please don't leave yet. We have another story for you. The Juniper Tree. While the story of Hansel and Gretel tells of children abandoned in the forest, some of the darkest fairy tales collected by the Brothers Grimm explore even more disturbing themes. One of the most infamous of these stories is known as the Juniper Tree. In this tale, a wealthy merchant lives with his second wife and his 2 children, a young daughter and a son from his first marriage. The stepmother despises the boy and envies the love his father shows him. One afternoon, she lures the child to a heavy wooden chest and tells him that he may take an apple from inside. When the boy bends down to reach into the chest, she suddenly slams the lid shut, cutting off his head. Horrified at what she has done, the woman quickly places the boy's head back onto his body and ties a scarf around his neck to hide the wound. When the daughter later approaches her brother, she asks him for an apple. When he does not respond, she strikes him in frustration, and his head falls from his shoulders. The stepmother then convinces the terrified girl that the death was her fault. To hide the crime, the woman cuts the boy's body into pieces and cooks it into a stew. That evening, the father returns home and unknowingly eats the meal prepared for him, praising its flavor. Meanwhile, the daughter secretly gathers her brother's bones and places them beneath the branches of a juniper tree growing in the yard. Soon, a strange and beautiful bird emerges from the tree. The bird begins to sing a haunting song describing the murder of the boy. It flies through the town, repeating the story, gathering gifts from those who hear its song: a gold chain, a pair of red shoes, and a heavy millstone. Finally, the bird returns to the house where the crime was committed. It gives the gold chain to the father and the red shoes to the sister. But when the stepmother steps outside to hear the bird's song, the bird drops the millstone upon her head, killing her instantly. In that moment, the bird transforms back into the murdered boy, restored to life beneath the branches of the juniper tree. And the family is finally reunited. Stories like the juniper tree remind us that many early fairy tales were not gentle bedtime stories, but powerful tales of betrayal, justice, and revenge. We at the Ember and Ink Studios like to thank you for listening to our Dark Origins of Fairy Tales series. Is there a fairy tale you'd like to know more about? Leave us a comment. If you've enjoyed this tale, or you're enjoying the series, why not consider subscribing? Help us reach 50 subs. Turn on notifications and never miss another episode again. It's totally free, I promise. And smash the thumbs up button, because it does really help with the analytics. Be sure to return next week when the Ember and Ink Studios bring you Episode 6, Rapunzel, The Secret Hidden in the Tower.